As the mercury climbed in Victor Harbour, more than 3,000 homes and businesses had their power cut.
Well, it's a real problem because we have no FPOS machine, no music, no lights, no till.
ETSA says it cut power to prevent the risk of fire from trees falling on live power lines in high winds. It acted under legislation introduced after the 1983 Ash Wednesday bushfires.
South Australia last turned off the power to high fire risk areas in January last year.
To me, it's a no-brainer. You know, if you stop the fire, you stop the problem. But and prevention is the best cure.
For almost 7 hours, parts of the Florio Peninsula near Victor Harbour were without electricity. Graham Philp is Victor Harbour's mayor.
I know here they have ability to map a fire, know exactly where it's going to run and what's going to in place in front of it. So I'm assuming Victoria's got that technology, and that's how they learn how to fight the fires and use their resources. So the technology is not hard. It's been there for a long time, and it's just a matter of getting those plans in place. My advice would be to keep turning the power off on those extreme days.
But turning off power supplies presents its own set of problems. Chief among them are health concerns.
You will certainly do harm to a community if you cut their power, but you will not certainly provide them with any benefit because you cannot be sure that the power assets were going to cause a bushfire. And the health impacts of cutting power are really very significant, especially on days of hot weather.
The New South Wales Health Department's Dr. Richard Broome has co-authored an influential paper for the Medical Journal of Australia, arguing that cutting power will kill more people than it saves.
Those risks associated with power failure exist on heatwave days and they exist on catastrophic bushfire days, and often those two days are related. I agree that you can't make the direct comparison, but the point is, as I said, is that you can't ignore those risks that may well exist on days of catastrophic bushfire danger.
They were talking about turning off because of heat only, and clearly we don't turn power off because it's hot. It's a combination of fire danger level, wind speed and high bushfire risk areas. So we wouldn't be turning off preemptively the power within the Adelaide metropolitan area.
More than 3,000 people were affected when the power was turned off in parts of South Australia last year. But there were no reports of additional deaths or illness.
Not to my knowledge, no. Although we do have an elderly community in our area, I'm not aware of any direct deaths, etc., from the heat.
That does not mean the sudden loss of power was popular with the local community. Businesses in tourist towns such as Port Elliot had to turn customers away.
The impact in our business was that we lost about $25,000 in turnover. We had a lot of people that came from the area, a lot of the older people that came to our hotel looking for relief as well, air conditioning, thinking that perhaps we had a transformer that could keep the power going and so forth. So there was a big impact on our business and just the people within the community.
I just think it's time that somehow we've got to take a fresh look at the relative risks, because I think once people have resilient plans that they can survive, not necessarily without inconvenience, but can actually survive and not die when the power is turned off, then it becomes a sensible and viable proposition to save lives.
Turning off power supplies to prevent bushfires was not recommended by the Victorian Bushfires Royal Commission or the government task force set up to recommend ways of improving power line safety. Instead, power companies have been given 10 years to adopt newer technologies while improving inspection and maintenance regimes.
Does that mean that power lines are less likely to cause bushfires today than they were on Black Saturday?
The answer to that is definitely yes. Since 2009, the legacy of the 173 people that died is unprecedented investment, maintenance, research, and importantly, collaboration between governments, regulator, and the industry.
The program that was put in place is a 10-year program. So my expectations is that even at the moment, if there was another Black Saturday event, the impact would be less, but there would still be a potential impact of those of the power lines to start fires. But I would expect it to be less even now. But it's a 10-year program, so we've just got to hope we don't have another Black Saturday in the next 8 years or so.
Undergrounding all power lines would solve the problem. But with a price tag of $40 billion, it's judged to be prohibitively expensive.
Right, what we've got here is a shot with a normal speed camera. You've got 3 copper bars, similar to the 3 conductors you'll see on high voltage overhead lines. There's a short across them, you get the fault, and you get copper droplets falling all over the place at the end of the test.
Electrical engineer Dr. David Sweeting gave evidence to the Bushfires Royal Commission. He is now casting doubt on a key element of Victoria's plans to make power lines safer.
And how comparable is this to what would happen with a power lines clash?
If the fault current's the same, the amount of droplets would be almost identical.
Clashing power lines, tree branches or birds can cause faults like the one seen in this experiment.
The arc squirts metal droplets out of the 2 conductors. Those metal droplets come out, they're hot, they're molten metal when they come out, and they fall to the ground. Now, if that flammable material's got moisture in it, all I'll do is dry it out a bit. If that's got no moisture in it, it can get it up to ignition temperature.
And you have a bushfire.
And then you have a bushfire.
In the past, such faulting power lines would be automatically reconnected, which can cause more arcing. Now, on extreme fire risk days, Victoria has decided not to automatically restore power to faulting lines in high-risk areas.
I think you'll get the same outcomes. As far as carrying a
Dr. Sweeting says that on a high-risk day, the initial fault is enough to start a fire.
If they land on grass where there's no humidity and they've got still got enough temperature by the time they hit the ground, then they can ignite the fire. If the grass has got any humidity, then all they'll do is dry out a tiny little spot in a millimetre diameter, and that's all that'll happen.
But that's not the situation on extreme fire risk days, like Black Saturday.
Like Black Saturday.
I think it would be inevitable that there would be a fire start from electricity assets on that type of day if that day occurred again. That would be, under our current arrangement, probably a code red day. The assets are, I don't think the assets are at this point robust to stand that type of day, and as a consequence I'm sure we would have a fire start, and that could be very, very tragic or very serious to the way the state is.
Despite improvements in the state's network, Energy Safe Victoria's own statistics show that the number of fires started by power lines has actually increased since 2009.
It is like any engineering system, it is subject to failure. But to try and put this into some context, there are tens of millions of potential points of failure in our electricity system. The risk will never be eliminated with the current system, which is why the Royal Commission, appropriately so, recommended that the overhead lines be replaced in the highest bushfire risk areas with bundled cabling, insulation, or other technologies. And that is the great mission that we are now dedicated to.
Over a decade, that mission is costing Victorians $750 million. Black Saturday's destruction is costed at more than $4 billion. It's a question of how much we are prepared to pay versus the amount of risk and inconvenience we are prepared to endure.
I think already you would expect that we probably would have halved the chance of a fire starting. Is that acceptable? I mean, the community has to sort of make a decision. So instead of having 173 fatalities on Black Saturday, would we accept 80? That's a decision that the community and the government has to sort of make. That's what we're saying. So that's what we get for our $1 billion. Is that a good investment?
The power companies themselves admit there are sort of unavoidable risks in the use of overhead power lines in a state which has the highest bushfire risk on the planet. So, unfortunately, there is an unavoidable risk unless you turn off the power lines, I think, and that's politically very difficult.
South Australia is the only state to have made that choice. No catastrophic bushfires are known to have been started by power lines there since 1983.
I think a lot of people feel that what's out there is safe, and they don't understand the nature of what happens if a piece of that equipment fails. That's the knowledge that the general public doesn't have, which other people have.
The greatest cause of Australia's most destructive and deadly bushfires continues to stare us in the face. Like Victoria, New South Wales believes it's got the balance right between safety and the community's need for electricity. But the evidence already in suggests that the most damaging bushfire already this season was sparked once more by the fire in the wire.
Of course, the elephant in the room on this issue is climate change. And if it's true that we face a world where weather extremes are going to become more and more commonplace, then the critical points of this story come into even sharper focus. Next week, the obesity epidemic that may have begun in the West but is taking over the world. Until then, good night.